Hey everyone, today we are interviewing someone somewhere, the founder and lead of Airplane Simulation Company, the module maker behind the C-130 in DCS. And this module is an interesting one. The C-130 is known for logistics, and it's coming into the game not known for its combat adjacent features. How hard was it to sell in this module into ED? What features are coming out that are specific to this module that will flesh out the logistics gameplay? What will define this module? These are some of the questions that we get into as we unpack this module at its pre-order release. If you are tickled by what is said here, then feel free to pre-order the module on their website. The link is below and in the description. If this is your first time here, this channel focuses on multiplayer sim gameplay. So if you're into that, please subscribe. Today we're joined by someone somewhere who is the founder of a simulation company, the module maker that is making the C-130. At the time of this recording, we are basically a week before the pre-order goes live, but by the time this hits, the pre-order should be live by now. And someone somewhere, I think you are known in the scene because of your involvement with as a module maker. But if people are not familiar with you, could you introduce yourself and kind of speak about your involvement in the DCS scene?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And you can call me Matt if you want. The someone moniker is sort of a bit extreme, maybe. So yeah, I've been working on the C-130 for about 3 years now. Before that, I kind of came to DCS right before the pandemic, and I really wanted for a multiplayer scripted server that I was running privately just with some friends. I mean, it was a pretty standard thing, this kind of open world map idea, and then you sort of fight your way across the map, capping bases. And what I really didn't like was that when we'd capture a base that had been held by Russians or Syrians or something, there'd be all these Fox 3 missiles and JDAMs and things. And at least I'm told that Russians don't store JDAMs for you when you overrun their defenses and take over a base. And so I wanted this kind of idea of like a resource economy, and there just was nothing in the game. And so that was kind of what made me start thinking about, okay, like, is there a logistics angle in DCS? And it's kind of from there that the C-130 kind of spawned over a bit of time.
Okay, so first server operator, and then identified the missing gray space, I guess, or the white space, and then decided to tackle it with a module. So that kind of gives. Actually, before we go into the module itself, I actually have always wondered because I actually find the name of your company really interesting, a simulator company. I'm just like how did you end up on that?
It's an airplane simulation company. That's what we are, you know. I don't know. I think there's something kind of amusing about the name. I always thought it was funny. But like, you have to name stuff, and sometimes you have lightning strikes inspiration, and you have something really clever. But I think there's also, I don't know. I have a fairly dry sense of humor, and I sort of thought, like, we had all these like stupid ideas, like, prop wash simulations, or you know I don't know, other kind of like plays on the C-130 itself. But you kind of want to be pragmatic about it and not, name your company after a propeller if you maybe will make things that don't have propellers. But it was honestly just that I had to name it something, and I didn't have any better idea, and I thought it was kind of amusing. I wish there was a better a better story, but it's it is sort of what it looks like.
I think what's really interesting, or more, there's a lot of different interesting things about each module maker and their projects. But I think one of the interesting things about the C-130 project is that there's a mod for the C-130 in DCS. And I was never really quite sure if there was a relationship between the
There is.
mod team and your company.
There
And
is.
yeah, so I'm kind of hoping if you can kind of unwrap that.
Yeah. So there definitely is. So that's actually the origin story, really. I wanted this idea of this logistics system, and then one day I came across the free mod. I thought, oh my god, this is like exactly what I want. And so I figured, okay, I'll make everybody download this thing, and we'll integrate it, because at that time we'd been using, I think we had like the TF51 was
Yeah, every server
the
does
quote
that.
unquote cargo plane. Yeah, like everyone does this, right? And I was like, okay, it's like vulnerable and slow, but it's also like too vulnerable because it doesn't have an RWR or anything. And it's not very realistic. So so I found the C-130 mod, and I thought, okay, this is amazing. But the problem at that time was I had the Steam version of the game, and if you downloaded the Steam version of the C1 of the game and then tried to run the C-130 mod, this is, I don't know, maybe like 4 years ago, it basically just didn't run. Like you got like 3 frames a second or something like that, and no one really knew why. And so I'm a software engineer, and so I I attached a debugger to it, and I saw, oh, okay, like there's this particular code path that is trying to execute, and for whatever reason, the Steam version of DCS didn't have that particular API. It wasn't part of the game. It was probably something that was deprecated, and they removed it from their build script for the normal version of DCS and not the Steam one, or sorry, the other way around for some reason. And so I wrote a message to Anubis, who's the guy that was making the mod at the time, and I said, "Hey, here's the problem. Here's how you fix it." And then he and I started talking, and I figured there's probably some other features that could be added. I worked on like the RWR page, the nav radar page, some of those things, and so we started to work on this more and more, and it got like increasingly elaborate. Got to the point where I got fixated on this idea of the TAWS page, and the TAWS page in the C-130 is the terrain avoidance page, and so it's this sort of ring that is around your plane, and there's these boxes, and the boxes show like relative elevation. So basically, if you're flying and you have TAWS up and you're flying towards a red box, you're going to die. That's terrain that's above you. If you fly towards a yellow box, you might die. A green box, you won't die. And a blue box, if you fly down into that, you'll drown because that's water. And I wanted to have this system, but in order to do that, you have to be polling the terrain of the game like a whole bunch, which from the Lua side of things, which is what you have to use for a free mod, that's not so efficient. And so we had this like multi-threaded TAWS implementation, and it was this really complicated thing. And at some point I was just like, wait, what are we actually doing here? This is insane. If we're going to go to this amount of effort, like we should just make the real plane, like just do the whole thing. And that was kind of the day that I thought, okay, maybe we should have an airplane simulation company.
So let me think about this. So the modder to module maker pipeline, that's not new because that's happened before. But I think what is new is that, because let me say it this way, like Gurnelli and them, they made other stuff, but now they're making F-100. But for you guys, I think this is the first time where the actual mod aircraft is going to evolve, or the project's going to evolve into like official status. Because is that right?
Yeah.
Let me think about that. I don't think any other mod has ever really turned into an official one, right?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I should also say there, at first at least, I thought that there might be able to be some kind of connective tissue between the free mod and this project in terms of the software. That turned out not to really be the case for a variety of reasons, just in terms of like how it was all written originally and the different features and requirements for what we needed it to be doing. There was like some day where I said, okay, like we're declaring code bankruptcy, and we basically deleted all of the mod code and we just started from scratch. This was maybe like a month or 2 months into the project. It was pretty clear immediately. So while the project is the same, there's not a single line of code that carries over from the free mod, which is just sort of the way that it shook out. But I guess I should just clarify that there is really no real, like, it wasn't like we didn't benefit from any kind of starting point, unfortunately.
Okay, so actually that's kind of leads me to my next question, because I've, let me say it this way, like how hard, okay, there's like two different pieces, I think, right? Because my question is, how hard or how easy was it to convince ED to allow you guys be able to build a C-130 slash, or to convince ED to even allow a C-130 to be built? So I guess this question comes in two parts. So the first part, I guess, to start with the easy one, because we're already on the topic, is like, do you think the mod helped to build a case in order to get the official the official contract to do a project?
Yeah. So I mean, it's sort of impossible to say because I don't have access to a time machine where I can go back and not we can do no mod and then come back into the future and try to convince them and see how it differed. But I mean, I certainly think it couldn't have hurt. But on another level, from ED's perspective, with regard to third-party projects, I'm sure there are things that they would just say aren't appropriate or don't make sense, or I don't know. Like if you wanted to make a hang glider, they'd probably say no. But from their perspective, it's just kind of good business to have as many planes, I think, as you could have. And this is a military aircraft that's incredibly iconic. I don't know of a military plane at all that is maybe as iconic as the C-130. It's just been in service for so long. I mean, if you've ever been in the military, you probably have found yourself in the back of a C-130 at some point. Maybe you had a terrible time. Maybe you had maybe it saved you somewhere, with some evac thing. But it's a super iconic plane, so I think that helped also. But I think from ED's perspective, their main question is just, does this thing fit at all? Which again, I think the bar for that is like reasonably low because unless it's something crazy, there's really no harm. But then it's also just, are these people that want to make this thing, are they like credibly capable of doing that? Like, is there any evidence that these people could do it? Because making a DCS module is a very hard thing to do just on a technical basis and an artistic basis. So I think having the mod as a demonstration point was pretty key, because the way that it really happened was I decided that we should at least try. I didn't know for sure. But I reached out to some contacts that I had at ED and I said, hey, can we get a meeting with, I guess, Matt Wagner and DeGray, and I'm just going to make this pitch. And we got on this call and we had all these features that we had made, originally intending to maybe release into the free mod that we ultimately decided not to. So we had a whole bunch of new stuff to show. And I just said, look, I'm interested in doing this. I'm going to show you some compelling stuff. If you think it's cool and you want to have it in the game, then great, let's do it. And if not, then that's no big deal either. But I'm not going to do some like weird application. Like I'm just going to show you the thing, and if you want to do it, then let's go. And so I showed them. I don't know. I demoed it for maybe half an hour, and they said yes. They thought it was cool. Because I think the other factor for DCS is that, we're kind of running out of iconic airplanes, right? There aren't that many, especially fast jets left, that are like really iconic and you can make right now. Things like obviously like a Rafale, okay, sure, like that's very compelling aircraft, but hard to make for legal reasons or technical reasons. And then the Cold War stuff, maybe I don't know, maybe the F-111 is maybe one of the only ones that's left out there that's really iconic. And so if the game is going to keep making more aircraft, and I think it is, you're going to have to spread out into different types of machines. And a cargo plane like the C-130, I thought was a pretty obvious starting point.
Okay. So there was no reaction to them, like, I don't know. I'm just trying to picture the call. And if they were like, why a C-130? Why not some, like, I don't know if they try to push it toward a combat plane, but what you're saying makes sense. Like, it is, super.
The conversation was very, the conversation was very much, I'm here to present a proposal to make a C-130. So maybe they thought in their minds, this guy's an idiot, and he's not going to sell any modules, and he needs to, he should go make something else. Maybe they thought that that would be a reasonable thing for someone to think. Obviously, I disagree on some level, but for me at that moment, it was like, either we're going to do a C-130 or we're not going to do anything, because at that point, I was laboring under the totally incorrect belief that it was going to be easy and we were like mostly done. That was kind of the conceit of the whole thing. Is I thought we had a mod that was going to be mostly transferable and was in the general vicinity of the quality level and the accuracy level that we wanted, and that turned out to not be true at all later. But that's another story.
Well, actually, let's unpack that a little bit. So basically, I guess when you were awarded the contract, it's like, okay, great. Like, we're going to go into this project. We're probably at a 5 out of 10 in terms of like work being done. And then I think you said within a month, you probably realized like, oh, we're actually at a 0. We have to start all over.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of points in the project like that where I think I've moved the goalposts. Maybe you'd say, I mean, to be clear, like there hasn't been any like extra pressure. It's not like ED comes and they say like, "Hey, we looked at your very, very, very early alpha and we think that these things need to change." It's not really how it works. I mean, really, you're just kind of in your silo and you're doing your work, and then one day you show up and you say, "Hey, I think I'm done," and then that's the point where they might say, "Okay, we think that these parts are deficient or whatever." But you know, we were years away from that at that point. I think the first realization that we had was about the art. We knew that obviously the mod 3D models were not remotely in the level of quality that needed to be delivered for a full fidelity product, but the like if you were to divide the workforce that we had at that point, I mean, it remains a very small team, but there's a lot more people that are writing software than we're making art. And so we tried to find some shortcuts where we thought, okay, well, maybe there's like a C-130 we can license or something. We could license a 3D model from someone. And we went out and tried to do that, and then we had this series of just awful revelations where we kept realizing that there were just horrible errors in the model that we had licensed. And so we went from thinking, oh, we've nailed it, we've cracked the code, and we're going to be done in a year. Like our artist he would send me a message and he'd be like, hey, there's a problem with the model, and I'd be like, okay, is it really bad? And he'd be like, well, I don't know, we can maybe work around it. And then the messages kept getting like worse. And they'd be like, hey, I noticed that the center console of our model is flat, but the center console of the real plane slopes at like a 15-degree angle. And that might seem like a really trivial detail, but it's actually not, because what happens with these things is that as you get some geometry error at the front of, say, an aircraft, it just compounds as you go backwards, right? So if like the front starts too wide and then you draw your lines backwards, then you end up with a plane that's like 6 feet too wide by the time you get to the middle of the fuselage or whatever. And so it's really hard to fix this stuff in a way that doesn't screw up all the other geometry if you want it to be accurate. And so we ended up throwing away that model, and at some point we just said, okay, screw it. We're just going to throw money at the problem, I guess, and we're just going to do an entirely new cockpit and an entirely new external. And that's where we are now. The model is really awesome. It's incredibly detailed and incredibly accurate. But the same thing was true with the code, where we just said, look, it's like, what is our aspiration for this? And I think at first the aspiration was that it's good, and then at some point, I don't really know that there was like a day where we decided we were going to put the stake in the ground, but at some point we just decided, okay, this needs to be like basically perfect from a systems accuracy perspective, like up to and including the level where the U.S. Air Force could use it as a training tool.
So,
and that's what I think is the level that we've hit.
Yeah, I've heard that art. I think it's. I would like to think that this point, to me, it's a little ironic, or maybe not obvious, I guess. This whole thing about art, because I've heard many other projects get really, especially the newer module makers, seem to art seems to be the biggest constraint or bottleneck for a lot of them, and it's ironic to me because why is it ironic? It's ironic to me because DCS, I guess, is known for the projects taking a long time, but usually the players get presented some sort of like untextured model,
Yeah.
right? And then that's like in your visual brain, right? But that seems to be more true for like the older module makers, and then the newer ones, it seems like it's much more code forward. Like you guys are like really ahead of the curve in terms of like the systems and such, and then the model or the art is a thing that's the bottleneck. So that's it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean the art is hard for a few reasons. I mean, first of all, like the whole project ends up being hard, and I think for a project, I mean, principally the reason that the C-130 has been so hard is just the scope of it. And I mean that like in the physical sense and in the sort of abstract sense. Like in the physical sense, it is a giant plane. And so if you have to texture two planes or model two planes, and one is twice as big as the other one, it's probably not twice as time consuming, but but it's more than it's more than 10% more time consuming, just because you have to make all that geometry and then you have to texture all of that detail. So there's that factor of it. And then there's the sheer number of systems that the aircraft has, and that's the software side that gets hard. But from the art perspective, I think the hard part that I'm not sure everyone realizes is that the visual level in DCS is insane on the art side. Like, it's insane. It exceeds AAA games in many cases. And it's not to say that like that the art in DCS is like quote unquote better than what it is in, I don't know, like Cyberpunk 2077 or something, but there is no asset in any other game that receives as much attention as the cockpit of a DCS module. I mean, I'm sure that the civilian flight sims are the same way, so I'm not saying that DCS is necessarily the outlier in that way, but there's just very few assets in the game world where it's like one thing and it's really big. You know, maybe this level of attention would be given to the main character of like some sort of like first person shooter or whatever, but that's a much smaller surface area than the entire cockpit and external of an aircraft. So I think that's the hard part, is finding people that are that obsessive about the detail, because that like the rivet counting stuff is, it's a very real thing, right? People in this community, they want it to be that accurate, and that's the promise or the commitment that we're kind of making to them when we sell them the thing, is that it is that accurate. And so you have to find people that really give a damn about aviation and happen to be really skilled 3D artists, and those are two things that, I mean, they definitely exist, but if you just get a random person that makes, characters for some sort of game studio, they are not necessarily going to just fall out of a tree and be like, oh, I really care about recreating, the internal structure of, I don't know, like the mechanical structure of the landing gear or something, because it's not totally obvious that would be important. And it's a long project, so you really have to like it and you really have to care. And if you don't, then the product will be worse. So finding those people is hard. And then a lot of the time they'll have other jobs, so they won't be able to work on it full time, and you just kind of have to make it work with the way that you can.
So you are getting close to release. So we're talking on, what day is today? Today's, oh boy, Sunday. Sunday scaries are going to hit me pretty soon. So today's Sunday, the 27th. I think your pre-order is going live on the 1st?
That is the plan.
The 1st. So you have 6 days to add in a lot more rivets. What's your general release plan until?
Yeah.
Like what? I guess what's left to do. I'm guessing the flight model's been submitted and blah blah blah, and what, it's now just running around getting screenshots and getting the store ready.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, basically. It's really, I've got to spend the next week getting a store website finalized so that we can take payments and all that stuff, which is kind of surreal that we're at that point, but yeah, it's really that, and then just polishing off the last edges on the release trailer, making sure that all the really compelling parts of the product are shown there. And then, yeah, we'll go to pre-order. People can save a little bit of money if they want to pre-order it. If they don't want to pre-order it, that's fine too. And then it's kind of full steam ahead on getting it out to people in the real world. I mean, this is not something where, we're like unsure of when it will be done or something. I mean, I'm unsure of the day that it will hit, release, but not because we have a bunch of really critical, outstanding work items. We really don't at this point. So we're pretty confident that it'll be a fairly short stay in the purgatory of the pre-order shadow realm, or whatever you want to call it.
So let's talk about the module itself, because we've been talking about like the process, and but now let's get into the actual module, because I'll just be a little blunt, but like DCS in some ways is a bit barren, meaning there's so little that exists outside the cockpit. The game has been called sometimes digital cockpit simulator. Yes. Which whoever came up with that is bless them, because that's a funny one.
It is pretty much bang on. Yeah.
So choosing a logistics aircraft is, among that, like in front of that backdrop is a pretty interesting one because it's definitely it's a very thoughtful choice, conscious choice, I should say. And, you're going against the grain, right? This is a very unique module.
Yeah.
So, what is coming with the C-130, or with the base game? And are there any base game changes that may come along with the module, that's going to allow for some compelling gameplay that's going to be more like logistics oriented?
Yeah, well, I mean, I should say at the start, I mean, to the extent that it is a digital cockpit simulator, it's a really great cockpit, right? So I think it'll stand alone well on that basis. But of course, I'm not deranged. I know that it does need to fill out a bunch of other gameplay, sort of requirements, or else it'll fall flat. And that's the thing that was really clear from the start of the project is like if we're going to make a product that's this differentiated and kind of this outside of the kind of the beaten path of DCS and where most sales come from, it has to be really good, like on all levels. It has to look good, it has to fly good. And I mean, this is true for everybody, but like doubly so, I think here. I don't think that there will be a lot of forgiveness from the community if we say, oh, okay, like, the flight model's trash, or, we didn't model, I don't know, like hydraulics, or some set of other things, or we shipped a really great flight model but have no logistics. Like it has to be all that stuff, because it is really distinct. Um, so in terms of the gameplay side, though, I mean, the most I think there's some misconceptions some people have about like what a C-130 does, and I think a lot of people think that it's like a strategic airlifter that you would take off from Nebraska with 35,000 pounds of Ganvilized steel or something and like fly to Dubai. But that's not really the mission of the C-130. The C-130 is a tactical plane, and so it's going to fly low, into dangerous places, and do, it's going to get shot at. It has a defensive system that is extremely elaborate, for that reason. So it's obviously not a fighter jet, but it is a plane that fits into a kind of DCS style high threat environment maybe better than some people think. I'm sure a lot of people probably know this, but I think there's definitely a subset of people that think that it's kind of like an airliner, that just carries military equipment, and you could do that with it for sure. It has a civilian style FMS, and you can do all that stuff. But if you want to fly into really high threat areas and do airdrops, that is exactly the wheelhouse of this thing. And doing airdrops is way more compelling than I think a lot of folks will expect. Like it's basically CCRP, but just with parachutes rather than bombs. Except for when they are actually bombs, like the Moab. So there's also that. Um, and that'll be there on release. But what we really wanted to get right was a really engaging gameplay system for loading cargo, and then managing the resources that are attached to those pieces of cargo. And whether those are like vehicles or weapons. I think that the DCS system for this is somewhat anemic right now, just because there aren't any other cargo planes. I know the Chinook has something, but we wanted to make it a little bit more seamless. So we have an entire menu system for this where you can identify, um, you know, objects, units, or whatever that are nearby that are marked as cargo, and then you can load them into the plane. You can associate resources with them from the DCS native warehouse system. Load them, take them out of one warehouse, put them into another warehouse. There's weight and volume restrictions based on that. So we have um, we the system basically looks at the volume of the thing that you want to load and then compares that to the volume of the thing that you're putting inside of, and doesn't let you put in more stuff than would fit, which I know sounds kind of obvious, but I don't know that, in the Chinook, at least right now, I don't know that there's any, there's no restriction like that. So that's realistic, and then there's weight and balance implications for all that. But the main thing is that you can airdrop this stuff into FARPs or any other base, and then when they land, they'll unload themselves into whatever the warehouse is where you drop them. Vehicles will be the same way, right? So put the vehicle into the C-130, airdrop that onto an enemy base or something like that, and then it'll turn into a normal DCS unit. And I think that that'll open up a lot of gameplay opportunities because in DCS, obviously, like I think all of us that have worked in multiplayer, especially, have a kind of tortured relationship with the ground units. You have all these good ideas, you want them to do these things, but the challenge typically, at least in my experience, it kind of emerges with distance and pathfinding. And so I'm hopeful that with the C-130 at least, okay, maybe if I drop the Humvee 300 miles from, Incirlik or whatever, it won't make its way there in any kind of reasonable way. But if I airdrop it, 30 meters from the enemy, I think that will have a better outcome. And I think that will hopefully create the opportunity for like a way more engaging kind of ground conflict than maybe we have right now.
So to clarify, just make sure I'm tracking correctly, because I'm like picturing it in my head. So, but basically, what you're saying is that like if you're in a C-130 and you're on the ground, and there's a bunch of like whatever jeeps, trucks, whatever next to you, that the C-130 module will be aware of that. It'll know of those units' existence around you, and you can basically ingest them. And then
you can load them in. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, not ingest, load. And then
I mean, you could ingest them. I don't know that it would go well, but you could
basically,
try.
But also, it's not just about like, hey, can they fit, but also like the order of how they get in, and like how they're displaced inside, and how the weight's distributed, and like the actual volume is accounted for. So you're actually. Yeah. Like you actually have to do like a load master type of role, and you just can't it's not like CTLD stuff, which is like, Huey's carrying an Abrams inside of it.
Correct. And I should clarify, I mean, all of this is visual. The only part where there's kind of any abstraction layer is when, like, for example, maybe you would spawn a like CDS crate, like this is an airdrop unit, and it would have a parachute on it, but you want to put stuff like inside of that box, right? Because no one is just flying around with empty boxes just like because it's fun. I mean, I guess you could, but what you want to do is you want to put, I don't know, like Mark 82s in there or something that is required at some other part of the some other thing that's required on some other part of the map. And so what you do is you can spawn the crate, and then there's a resource manager that you can pop up and then basically pick, okay, what are the things that I want to put into that box? And then those come out of the warehouse of the DCS warehouse API at that base. And then when you drop that unit or unload that unit at some other location, whether it's a FARP, because you landed in the dirt and you unloaded it there, or you airdropped it onto the tarmac at some other place, then those will get unloaded, and then they'll go into that warehouse, and then people can, put them on their Viper, whatever it was. And then with the vehicles, I mean, that's even a more physical thing where it's just, hey, like, that goes into the back of the plane. You see it there. And yeah, if you can't fit, eventually you run out of space. So it's not like CTLD at all, where it's just sort of an abstraction. It's it's the actual unit. There's no scripting needed for this. This is all just native into the game.
So how amendable was ED throughout the process to build things out to allow for more capabilities or gameplay for the C-130? I mean, I guess I'm just kind of curious, like what did you have to build versus like what did they build?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you make a DCS module, like you have to understand that ED has limited resources and they have their own priorities and their own things, and like you can't come into it and be like, oh, okay, like I'll just ask them to make me like a radar or a logistic system. Like they're not staffed for that, and that's not really the agreement that you have with them coming in. So I've looked at it as, I want to take any of these features as far as I possibly can on my own inside of the C-130 module, right up until the point where it's just impossible. And so maybe the best example of this would be like the airdrop mechanic, right? So with airdrop, the way that the airdrop computer works is that it calculates like very precisely, if you set it up right, the exact point where that thing needs to be unlocked or the straps cut or whatever it is, for it to exit the plane and then fall at some specified rate and so that it hits the target. And so for that exit dynamic, that's like one thing where I realize, okay, like it's not really going to be a core priority for ED to make like this incredibly intricate like physics thing inside of the C-130 cargo bay. That's something that I need to do if I really care about it, and we did. So we have an entire physics engine that runs that governs the position of those crates or those units as they exit the plane. But the minute that they exit the plane, and I say, okay, deploy the parachute, that's got to be in the game world now, not the C-130 like software world. Because if the C-130 gets blown up or you despawn or whatever, like those need to be persistent game world objects that work just like anything else. And so that's where the handoff has to happen to, okay, that's where you call ED and you have to say, okay, look, we need like this parachute thing. And I don't think it was, I mean, obviously, you always want things to happen faster, um, but they are the ones that signed a license with me for a vehicle that's primary mission in the game is to airdrop stuff. So I don't think it was a shock to anyone that was a feature that was needed. But other than that, most of the stuff that you need for these kinds of features already existed. I was actually kind of surprised pleasantly to find that there's already like a pretty coherent warehouse API. I didn't, it was not really, there just wasn't any, there just weren't any planes or vehicles that use that stuff. And I guess that's maybe why it hadn't been exposed in the scripting API yet, although that's now since changed. And so so a lot of the mechanics for this kind of thing exist. I mean, you don't need any support to make a menu system. That's really just kind of up to you. And so that's what we did.
So, when a player thinks about certain modules, I think there are some features that kind of define them. All the modules are different, right? Because they're all made by different people. So some modules are known for their flight models, some are known for their radars. I think what are the features that you think are going to define the C-130?
Well, I mean, it's airdrop, I think, right? And then, I mean, I also think that the system's fidelity and depth, I think, will also define it. I mean, this thing has more like if I were to list off the systems that it has, the list is just very long. It's not that any one thing is like maybe like more complicated than, I don't know, some air-to-air radar mode of a Hornet or some such, but it's just there's just tons of them. So I think what I hope is that there'll be a subset of players who really lean into into learning those things, because it really rewards effort. The module, like the C-130 is a plane, is not very hard to use. You can get in it and get it up in the air and then put the digital map on one of the screens and just kind of eyeball your way around. Like you can do that in like 90 seconds. But and if that's the way that you want to play it, like that's a totally valid way to use the plane. But on the other side of it, if you really want to go in depth about this thing, there's just so much to learn, and it really rewards that kind of commitment to putting in the time, and it becomes more fun, at least in my experience, correspondingly. So that I think is one thing, but I think also the physics system is incredibly unique. The fun thing about making a physics system inside of a plane is that once you make it for like what you really needed it for, which was like the airdrop exit, you can start to apply those things to other parts of the plane that don't need it. Like the hinge of the microwave, for example, is like a physically simulated object, and it like you can open it, and like if you slam on the brakes, it'll like slam shut, and like and these are not just like animations. This is like a live physics thing that we're simulating. So there's that. There's also some other really unique things, like the Loadmaster slot itself is effectively like a first-person character. So you can walk outside the plane. You can go down the ramp. If you walk into the propellers, something terrible will happen to you. Everyone can experience that themselves. But it's and you know it's more in depth than just we're moving the camera around like it's on on a on rails. There's collision mechanics with the aircraft itself, so you're not going to like clip through it. It feels basically like a first person shooter style experience. So I think that's a really interesting thing because we make these incredibly detailed external models and whatever, but then in the game, you end up not seeing almost any of that stuff. There's not really a venue for it unless you're slowing around the camera in the F2 view or whatever. So I think exposing that to people will be really interesting, but I think it's at the end of the day, it's just that it's incredibly differentiated. I think is the biggest thing. If you want to fly another fast jet, then there's lots of options. But if you want a change of pace in the game, I think this is way more interesting than a lot of people expect it to be. And it also is incredibly fun to fly. I mean, this thing it absolutely rips. I mean, it's way more agile than I think people will expect it to be. I was talking to someone who's a YouTube content creator that's going to maybe make some videos showing it off in different scenarios, and he was saying it sort of feels like a 737 sized F-14, and I think that's a pretty apt description of kind of how it feels to fly. It's just this enormous, just huge control surfaces, huge amounts of lift and power. We get this question a lot of the time, and people will ask whether it will have JATO. JATO is the rocket system for short field takeoffs. And the funny thing is that the J model that is the one that we're making doesn't actually even have JATO. The H model did. And the reason is because the J makes so much more power than the H. Like it actually makes more power than the JATO boosters, I think, supplied or almost equivalent. And so it doesn't even need it. It's that powerful. It's just a crazy amount of thrust that's available to you. So it's really fun to fly.
Actually, you just made me realize something because this has been on my mind lately. Because the C-130 is a prop. I'm kind of I'm curious about like the complexities that comes with a flight model and for a prop aircraft because
yeah.
I've actually been kind of talking to a few people about this, and I think this is actually a really interesting point. But like DCS, it's the DCS warbirds in particular. I think are in some ways they can
really
show
nice flight models.
Yeah, exactly. But they really make DCS shine more so than some other modules because you really feel the torque. And I adore IL-2, but when you fly DCS Warbirds and then you go back to IL-2, it's like, oh my god, like you can really feel the lack of torque.
There's nothing like DCS in terms of flight models. And the reason for it is that DCS doesn't really have the idea of like a flight model in the sense of maybe MSFS. So like in most of these games, there's an idea of like a wing and there's like lift, and you say like, okay, I should get this amount of lift or this amount of thrust or whatever, and then it's like some sort of lookup system or whatever that's and basically the DCS SFM system, which is what the AI planes use, is in many ways like in that same style. But for the DCS actual modules, the way that we make these things is like literally it's that there's a template and that you complete basically a code that you have to fill in that the game calls every frame, and at the end of it you emit newtons, like, and then where they were, and that's it. Like, and then how you get the newton amount for that constitutes the lift and the thrust and the drag and all these other factors, that's completely up to you. So there is like no thing in the world that couldn't be represented by this system in terms of flight dynamics. Like, you could do anything. You could make a UFO, you could make a steam engine, you could make anything, because all you're doing is just emitting force. And then the game says, oh, okay, you gave me this much force and you weigh this amount. And then so the plane should move this far, this frame. And then the next frame, it tells you, hey, you moved this far. This is the scenario that the plane's in now. And then you give it the force again. So it really opens up all these opportunities to do that right now. It also opens up opportunities to, like, it's like all this rope, and you can totally hang yourself with it if you don't know what you're doing. And it's hard, and that's another reason why DCS modules are so hard to make. Is like you need to assemble this collection of really specialized people in a way that is sort of unlikely to happen by by chance. It's not like you can just put up a job posting and be like, seeking world-class aerodynamics engineer with experience in flight simulation, right? Like that person probably exists, but they probably work at like Lockheed Martin or something, and you probably can't afford them. So you need this kind of weird collection of people. And with the Herc in particular, it's a really crazy plane to fly. Like it's a very uncivilized machine. Like you could not charge people tickets like money to fly on this thing. It's incredibly loud. It's just incredibly violent. And when you talk about the torque or P factor, which is the effect of the propeller pulling the plane one way, it's incredibly pronounced in this aircraft because it's just 4 giant props and they all spin the same direction. There's other planes like the A400 that have counter-rotating props, but this one doesn't, and it's just a riot. I mean, you just go from idle to takeoff power, and if you've got a little bit of angle of attack, the thing's just yawing sideways, and it's a really, really, really fun plane to fly, and it could be a little bit of a handful, but it's not punishing, but it's like a late 90s Dodge Viper or something, right? It's like all gas, no brakes, and very limited traction control. So it's really fun to fly in that way. In terms of the propeller side of things, I mean, it's a very difficult model or like modeling challenge because for the jets, there's not this rotational component in quite the same way. And then with the C-130 in particular, the J model has what's called a constant speed propeller. So it's a FADEC driven system, which means that basically you use what we call power levers, which are not throttles. Throttles control combustion, and this doesn't. This just says, hey, I want to get this amount of horsepower. And then what it does, it varies the blade angle of the propeller blades in whatever way is required to generate the thrust that you've requested. So I think it was actually the first aircraft to have a fully computer-driven FADEC system for the engine. But that was a really challenging part of the project. But we think it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting because I never, the whole prop thing, I never really thought about that too much, but I do enjoy flying, or sorry, let me say it a different way. Like if it comes just from, when I think about having enjoyment come out of pure flying and doing no combat, the props are way more interesting to fly, in my opinion, than the jet. So having actually, it's funny because my next question was I was going to ask about the counter rotating props. That was a thing on this thing. So the fact that it's not, I can see this thing being a little squirrely. So that's neat. So yeah, okay. Let's switch over to.
You need to use rudder.
Yeah.
A lot of jet people don't know about the rudder.
Let's switch over to multiplayer. Are there any extra APIs that were made to allow for server owners to take advantage of? Just curious, because I know this.
Yeah,
we'll just start there.
So there have been. So basically, in the last year or so, there have been a few things that have been added that I would have probably pushed for if they hadn't been added on their own, but they have, and those are basically the ability to use the scripting engine to modify the warehouse state at different air bases. And that's a really important thing because before that, there was this kind of futility to doing logistics in DCS, even if you had a logistics plane. Like, I mean, I guess we sort of did with the mod C-130, but the futility was just that, great, you brought a bunch of AMRAMs, but now the server needs to restart. And so that's going, to zero. And that work kind of felt meaningless. And there wasn't a way for a server owner to script, say, saving how many AMRAMs were at that base, and then when the server restarts, to restore that. So now you can do that, and I think there are a handful of servers that are that have leveraged this functionality. And so that's one. Another thing is that you can load cargo or associate cargo to an aircraft via the scripting API as well. So that's a good one. But I think that the thing about it that I'm excited about, though, is that the way that the C-130 operates in single or multiplayer really removes a lot of the need for scripting. Like if you think about it, you shouldn't need a ton of scripting support to just carry around resources from one place to another. The player should be able to just do that. If I'm sitting at an airport and there's a bunch of stuff, why shouldn't I be able to load those things into my aircraft and take it wherever I want? And within reason, of course. So the mechanics that are under the hood in the C-130 DLL, I think, will alleviate a lot of that. Like if you're a server owner and you don't want to build out some elaborate scripting thing, you don't need to. The C-130 can still just exist there, and people can do logistics missions, and that's perfectly fine. And then if you want to make a really elaborate resource economy thing, and you want to have some sort of unit that is like iron ore or steel, and like the C-130 can truck it around, and then if you get an amount of iron ore, then you can like forge an AIM-9, then that's something you could do too. So those things broadly exist now in the scripting engine to the degree that I think that they need to. But this is another thing where if people have ideas where they think like, okay, if we only had this particular feature, we'd be able to do all this awesome stuff. Please like reach out either on our Discord at ASC or in any other way, because I'm always curious if people have ideas that I haven't thought of about how logistics could be more compelling in DCS. But I think it'll be fun already, just by default.
All right. Let's. I don't know when the release date is. I know the pre-orders on the first, and no need to say anything, but whatever. Let's say let's advance the clock. Picture yourself one day after the release. You log into a server, you hit F2, and you see a C-130. What would put a smile on your face? And meaning, what do you want to see happen in multiplayer with this module?
I want to see people affecting the battle like with it. I mean, I think that's the thing that everybody wants when they talk about logistics in DCS, is they want to have a way to impact the battle or the war, whatever you would like to call it, that represents those scenarios, outside of just dropping bombs. I mean, dropping bombs is one way to affect a war, but I don't know. I also think that if you showed up with a bunch of Patriot missile launchers or HIMARS or whatever it is, and you were able to position those and airdrop them in at strategic locations across a map, that would really matter at least as much as dropping a bomb on some particular place. And so what I'm hoping for is that people will learn to use it in a way that expands the ideas of what I might do in terms of tasking when I log onto a multiplayer server. Right now, you log onto a multiplayer server, and it's basically, do I want to do cap or do I want to do seed? And this will increase the number of things you could do, and I think that's what I'm most excited about. I'm also excited to see people learning the systems. I mean, there's just so much to learn if you want, in terms of like how to really precisely deliver airdrop loads with the CARP system. I mean, and it's a really cool system too. I mean, you have like all this HUD symbology, and there's like a bomb line that looks just like a CCRP queue, and like this countdown. It's like this whole red light, green light thing, and it's very dramatic and really exciting. The plane's gonna like pitch up as the cargo comes out, as the weight and balance shifts of the plane. So it's really super exciting. And you've got to get slow too, so you're going to be in this kind of vulnerable state for a few seconds. I think those are the things that I'm most excited about.
All right, what else do you want to get out there? Shout out. I'll give you the last word. Anything else you want to shout out into the void? We've been talking for what, an hour now.
Yeah, I think the biggest question people are going to ask is like release date, and like for sure, I mean, I guess nothing is ever sure, but something awful will have had to have happened for this not to have shipped by the end of the year. I think that the target is definitely well inside of the end of the year. It's not going to come out 2 weeks after pre-order, but it's not like our internal target is the very last day of December or something, and like if anything goes wrong, then like we'll totally miss. It's not like that. I'm hopeful that it'll be double-digit days from pre-order to actual release in people's hands. And then the other thing I just call out is just that if you buy the C-130, you're actually getting two C-130s, one of which will come later, but the one that will come later is the MC-130, which is the AFSOC special operations version, and that one will bring two pieces of functionality that are interesting. One is it's called the EO-IR pod, but it's basically just a targeting pod, but also player-to-player air-to-air refueling, and that. I'm a little hesitant to commit to like when the player-to-player AR will be a thing, because we do need some support from ED to do that. But I think that'll be really fun. I mean, I think like kind of the top of the pops for DCS C-130 fun is kind of like you have a friend, he's in a Hornet, like he escorts you in, you do an airdrop, and then he like refuels your plane on the way back. I think that'll be a really cool experience for people.
Wait, can you laser targets with that MC-130? Is that what you said, or
I think
no?
you'll be able. I did. There's some dispute about whether the C-130 pod has a laser that can pick up, like that can be used as a like for a like a laser JDAM or whatever. I think it would be a lot of fun. And
That sounds fun.
so answer is maybe yes. We'll see. Sounds like a lot of fun
Well,
to loiter in a C-130 and laser for things while refueling people.
you know what? I actually forgot you were doing two different variants. Yeah, I mean that's a whole other. It literally is a whole other ad, right? So that's like
Yep.
that's interesting. So yeah, all right. Well, yeah. I mean, the air-to-air refueling, the player-to-player stuff, that would be kind of neat too. I mean, I can imagine people lining up, queuing up in the air to all refuel. So that'll be neat. Anything else you want to throw out there?
That's no, I think yeah, I'm really excited to get it out there to people. It's been a lot of work, but yeah, I think we've made an interesting product. So I'm just excited to see the reaction to it.
All right. Well, good luck on your release. Hope things go well, and we'll keep track of the project and wishing you well.
Thanks. Appreciate it.